Welcome to the Unrationed Podcast. My name is Tony,
And my name is Evan.
and this is a podcast about dudes helping dudes be better dudes, crossing thresholds in the woods together.
I
How's
think the
that for a
woods are a
tagline?
version of the threshold. Like the woods are the threshold. But then there's also a threshold from not being in the woods to being in the woods. Yeah, lots of thresholds.
What is life if not a continual succession of crossing back and forth
I was
over
gonna say,
thresholds
what is life if not a threshold between two unknowns?
between that which comes before and that which comes after?
That's
The
right.
the great beyond from which no traveler returns.
That's right. So we think.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, no, but maybe we do. Um, have you lived before? Are there any famous people whom you have been in past lives?
I can't answer that question confidently one way or the other.
That's a cop out.
I've not been anybody famous in a past
Oh,
life.
huh, okay. Interesting. Um, should we do wild moments real quick?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Sounds
Well, and
great.
it's worth noting that Josh isn't here since we actually it seems like he's now legit on pat leave. There was somehow for the first 2 weeks or so of his baby's life, he seemed to be on pat leave, but still oddly available. And then now for the last 2 weeks, he's just been unavailable, which is how it should be.
Yeah. Well, and talk about a transition from what was to what will be, you know, I think it sometimes it takes time to slow down. uh and so that 2 weeks he was oddly available, I'm guessing was like, I don't know what to do during this transition period. So yeah, worth noting Josh is out paternity leave.
Yeah. But we could like pretend to be him if we need to for any answers. If there's anything we need from him, I think I can handle that. But
We might
how
be
about
able
a
to get
wild
away with it if we weren't on video. If it was just an audio podcast and you could do some voiceovers, but because of the video element here, I don't think we can get away with it.
we'll think about that. What's a wild moment?
Yeah. Hmm.
We'll tell you what, I'll rock and roll with one while I look at you thinking about it.
That
Um,
sounds great.
I am I'm gonna go with the wildness of being sick, where over the last 10 days, it started with my wife, and it looks like it was the flu. I think the flu went through our house. Um, but she was pretty much, you know, laid up with, the chills and the feeling hot and the fever and the loss of appetite, and it was dicey there for a little bit, and then it hit sky and then got wilder and finally got to me toward the end of last week. So we had about 10 days there where it's just one after the other of us, and it seems like it's happening to everybody right now, that on the at a time where COVID has receded a little bit. Um, Now we're coming into this winter where I think they're talking about three different things going on. I have not been paying all that much attention to it, but it is getting genuinely sick. It is I was going to say a nice reminder. I mean, it is a nice reminder, even though it absolutely sucks and is just about the worst, but um, of our connection to nature and the things we cannot see and how they can have an impact on our lives. But And also you just spend a lot more time on your bodily functions,
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, my family went through it uh, before Thanksgiving, so it was about a month ago now. But it was a good 2 week stretch where not everybody is fully sick for 2 weeks, but the 2 week stretch is like one person getting it, recovering, next person, and you kind of go through this line, and it's a 2 week, very difficult stretch. Yeah.
Word.
My wild moment. I don't know how to necessarily make this one wild, but it's what came to mind and immediately was I was taking some photos for my wife Grace's recent art collection that she released. And while I was taking photos, my daughter woke up from her nap. Grace carried her downstairs. Olive looks at me and says, "Daddy, what are you doing? Can I see?" And she sat on my lap and we started taking photos. There just happened to be a mirror across the room where we could see ourselves in the camera and in the mirror. And so I snapped these incredible, to me, I'm very biased. Incredible photos of Olive's emotion, like just raw excitement and joy to be looking at this camera and seeing herself and then pressing a button and that picture coming back up, which we've done on the phone plenty of times. So that process wasn't new. What was new to me is when I have a phone in my hand and I'm taking a picture, I'm in a different mindset than when I have a camera in my hand and I'm taking a picture. Like when I have a camera in my hand, I am like entering hobby mode, get the settings right, do this thing, and I really enjoy photography. And I felt like my daughter, I felt like Olive showed interest in something that I really enjoy. And I was like, oh my gosh, what an exciting thought that my children will enjoy something that I enjoy and we will get to do things like that together as they grow older. So I'm getting glimpses, I guess, of what life is like on the other side of having two very, very young children where it's not they're never interested in what you're interested in for a while. So that that was like a really life-giving, joy-filled moment. A lot of times is being spent indoors right now. It's been rainy for a week and a half, and we only have 9 hours of sunlight. And you can probably put that to shame up there in Canada. Far colder and darker, imagining, but yeah, not really a lot of time outside right now.
Nice.
Yeah,
You did post one of those photos on LinkedIn, and it is a delightful photo. I
thank
can
you.
second that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is my phone background now, which I guess since this is something that we show, is it gonna focus?
There you go. That's pretty good. That's pretty good focus. Yeah.
Yeah, you're driving this one, right?
Absolutely. Don't you feel like I'm under control? Like
Yes,
we've got it all
100%.
figured out.
Yep.
Um, let's let's get into this a little bit. Uh, we've started a LinkedIn group for, well, we called it Unrationed. We did not call it the Wilds. And at this point, we're pushing 30 gentlemen, and I think it won't be a no girls allowed sort of situation. We're gonna be inviting anybody who's interested in the sort of thing we talk about. But so far it's all gentlemen, and it's a step in the direction of where we're going with this thing, right? We're starting to come up with some answers, you know. Wild 32's been cool, and we went out and climbed a mountain in Colorado as a sort of a prototype of an unrationed event, and that was awesome. It was really great. Probably one of my highlights of the year.
Yeah.
Um, and we've got all these ideas for 2023. Um, so I want to touch base um, on what you're thinking, like where we're at. And I actually, so one thing is, are we ready to do another Wild 32 where we actually bring in other dudes and like do that deal?
I would love to. I so what we've done 3 Wild 32s. Is that right?
Yes, we are.
And I can. There's my dogs. They're in for the Wild 32. So we've done 3 Wild 32s. This would be our fourth. The data. I'm trying to think of if I have like actual metrics, which I do because well, I don't have metrics outside of Wild 32. The data. I'm a better person whenever I'm doing Wild 32 than when I'm not doing Wild 32 is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah.
I would like to do a Wild 32 as often as possible at this point.
All right. When should we start the next one then?
Let's see.
We can
Well, I
abbreviate
turned 32 on January 8th. How many days away is that? 7,
it.
14,
9, 18.
21,
We only got like 24 days, I
25,
think, until
26.
that.
That would have been a epic. Should have thought about that 6 days ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know when your birthday was. Um, well, should we start before or after Christmas? Shall we start before Christmas and get after it?
Well, so the thing is I don't necessarily mind having it overlap with holidays because the way that it's created encourages presence and intentionality more so than strict like not being able to do things. So I
Bird.
I feel as though I would be I would enjoy Christmas, I would enjoy New Year's in a more intentional way with Wild 32, knowing that I'm going to try to squeeze in 32 minutes of exercise, read and meditate even on those days and have a reason to do that and have people to be in that with me. So all that to say, but like what's the soonest we could start one if it were or who are we inviting? People that are in the unrationed LinkedIn?
Yeah, this is the so that's the question that's gonna then lead to when we start it, right? It's like, so the most we've had in a group of this is 6, right? And I think maybe we take a crack at something slightly larger, right?
Sure. I could go either way. 6 kind of felt like there wasn't the ability to connect with everybody in the way that seemed to happen with 3 or 4. So I guess we could gauge it and make a decision off of how many people actually want to join. Do we even have 6 people that want to join? And then from there, if we have more than, we could break it up where you're leading a cohort, Josh is leading a cohort, and I'm leading a cohort. Something of, or just anybody who's gone through it, that would be the model. So if you've done one Wild 32, you then are able to, or we probably could come up with some creative way to say this, where you now could lead a cohort of Wild 32 on your own.
I like that. I like that organic model for growth. I Do you see Wild 32 as something that we ever charge money for? Or is Wild 32 a like we show up and we like this is not something we're charged. There are other things that the Wilds is going to charge for, right? That's like we are building a business here. Like, do you see Wild 32 as something that we develop into a product that is sold, or do you see it as sort of a foundational community building piece that doesn't have a price tag on it?
That's a great question. The way I see it today is a community piece, which that's more of an obvious statement because we're not charging for it today. I don't
Yeah.
know how I see it in the future. I haven't thought of not seeing it the way that I see it today in the future. So community building would be my answer, a
Okay.
non-paid type thing.
So,
What are your thoughts?
uh, I agree. And when it comes to the should we be charging for what we're doing, the I frankly the main thing I would put in favor of a price tag is to get literal, but more importantly, metaphorical buy-in from people, right? That if you pay for it, then you're making a commitment of some sort, right? That your behavior is more likely than to follow. Um, so it's more having that and like maybe like establishing the understanding that wilds is something valuable, right? Like this relationship in a man's life is something where like you're relying on the wilds to help you become a better version of yourself, right? And you're willing to invest in that, right? And so like establishing that up front feels like it's potentially worthwhile. Um, but then it's more the main thing is like just avoiding situations where people just ghost or just don't do it, right?
Right.
So, but there's a fairly simple fix there, right? Where it's like if you fail to do something in Wild 32 for like, like if you're failing to show up, as like a foundational piece of it, a baseline piece of participating, then you get removed.
There is
Or
such thing as a DNF for Wild 32.
yeah, but like I want to. So we had one where the lovely fellow David he didn't make it. He just didn't make it. Um, he just wasn't into it, right? He wasn't into that format, which is totally fine. Uh, but if if we're not charging, which I think we're not, then I want us to very clearly articulate like you will be thrown out of the boat at this point if you don't do these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Five doesn't seem like too bad. At five, actually. So in that one where we had six, Dave was one who was kind of not around. So we had five um with Billy and Troy. Um
Want to try to do a 10 group?
well, I was wondering, yeah, like 5 and 5 potentially. But another thing I was thinking about was whether the LinkedIn group could provide a like place for like keeping hear me out, hear me out, hear me out.
I'm pulling a
We're
Tony intentionally.
we're just spitballing here. We're spitballing. All right. So with Wild 32, again, we're tracking these things daily, right? Part of the deal is a daily check-in, and we're kind of I know you understand what it is, right? But we're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
doing 32 minutes a day working out, 10 minutes sitting in silence, 10 minutes reading something nourishing, 10 minutes outside. We're avoiding substances stronger than caffeine and sweets. We are checking in on the daily, reporting on something we're feeling and something we're grateful for, right? So like that's the I'm I'm wondering whether there's a way where the text check-in is around the feeling stuff. So like that remains like that touch point. Like the reporting on the check marks could be moved into the LinkedIn group in like an like a a Wild 32 little like section where it's like a daily thing. It's like Wild 32 day 21, and you put it in there in a way. Do you think I'm making things overly complicated?
Yes. And I'm like, nobody is going to listen to this podcast episode. um, I think it's overly complicated. At the same time, like, I'm not opposed to trying it. I don't want to type anything personal in LinkedIn, even if it's in a group. So if you know what I mean, like, there's just something about it's. I'm not. Anyway, I don't
Even
know.
if it's a private, like a private group
Yeah,
for that thing.
yeah. I don't view anything on any social media platform as actually private. Like, I have zero in my mind. So the way that I think about it, I have zero privacy. Like, whatever is posted there is public. It's not actually private, even if the group is called a private group.
All right,
Whereas
fine.
a text message, I don't have that. It may be the same as true, and I'm deceiving myself of, like, even if I send a text message, it's not actually private, but it seems to be a communication channel that allows for greater privacy than a LinkedIn private group. And that also seems to be key for what we're trying to do here, which is growth, and our ability to grow may correlate with our ability to explore our inner life and share that with one another. That would be an interesting theory to research on some level. I think to grow, I'm not trying to rhyme. To grow, we must know. And I think we had to do something with that knowledge. I don't think it stays within. I don't think it stays with us. I think there's an aspect of growing that requires us to share what we know about ourselves and share where we're at. And those things may be more private in nature than LinkedIn. Now, I may be going beyond Wild 32 as well, because nothing like we're talking about some fairly simple check-ins for Wild 32, not life-changing, life-altering stuff. So
Yeah.
I may be taking it too seriously.
Well, the main thing is just trying to make it work, like
Yeah.
doing it in a way. And one thing aspect I'm interested in is we are collecting a fair amount of data about our behaviors and our activities in a way that seems worth starting to compile, right? So that we could see it. So just, part of this is my experience with the Rowdy and Axis, like the creative sprints where we had come up with a daily tracking for our sprints where it was basically like, did you do your creative work today or not? And green check for yes, red check. So very simple. And we had one, we got to a point where we had a 3-week sprint where they were all green checks for like 9 people over the course of 3 weeks, right? Like just a field of great. And having that compiled on a spreadsheet, number one, felt good, but number two, also was a way of looking and seeing that hey, we actually did this. Together, supporting one another, we made we made this picture of progress together, right? And we can't do that on text. And that's my I'm trying to figure out how we elegantly add an element there that can create momentum, right? In a way, so the text is very relational, which is good. What we need to find a way that we can also start building, right? Where this stuff, there's a continuity to it and a sense of momentum as
So
we're
there's,
going along.
I think there's probably a manual way we can do it until we have the funds and
Horse and
foresight to,
buggy? Horse,
yeah,
is that
horse and buggy.
okay?
I think that's a great way to get momentum.
That's okay. Okay. Well, that's right. You're the farmer, so
In our last Wild 32, Billy made a graph and sent it out once a week or whatever it was. I do think there's a version of this where what you're talking about gets sent out every day that visually represents what everybody's accomplished that day going into the next day.
yeah, I think that's right. And what Billy was doing was my concern with hiring Billy to do it is that as uh, a more senior person in Silicon Valley, in the tech scene, I think Billy may just be really expensive
I wasn't saying
for.
hire Billy to do it. I was in no way implying that we hire anybody to do it. It was just me at the end of the day sitting down and taking in the data that everybody's checked in and having a spreadsheet to put that into. I would be happy to do that for a Wild 32 and have it turn into a graph.
So you're our data intern.
Sure, if that's what it takes, I'll do it.
Okay, there will be an application process, but
Okay, I accept my application.
touche. Uh, okay, then that sounds pretty good. So
I'm not saying that is the solution. I'm throwing out an idea to because I agree with you.
yeah,
Having that
there are
data, a
a million
visual.
ways. Oh,
Hey, this is not going to be a podcast.
You don't think so?
Oh, there's no way. There's no way.
Really?
Yeah. What do you think? Okay, tell me why you think it should be a podcast. I'm really curious how we're at
Uh,
such different points.
we're building in public. It's so from a perspective. So we're talking about the thing where, like, the subject matter. We're talking about like men becoming better men. You and I are working on becoming better men as we're having this conversation. And we're also having a conversation about talking about how to build something that can help other men become better men. So like that, I know that I am more transparent than most people are in my process. Um, I think it's part of the secret to my success as a content creator. That it's like but that said, you've put out a whole lot more podcasts than I have. But for me, it's like the more real we can be, like just as opposed to presenting like we, when it comes to something that is fairly stripped down to begin with, but like we're usually like on a particular topic, sort of. Um, yeah, I find it's almost like a pulling back the curtain to show the thing getting made in a way that I find interesting.
I don't disagree with you
What do you see as the problem? Or like why do you say that it's not?
because it doesn't seem interesting other than uh, to us because we have something that we're trying to get to.
Um, and why do you say it's not interesting?
Because I am thinking of it in terms of podcasts that I want to listen to and this list I have that I would want to get to. And this type of a conversation I don't think would make the list of things that I would want to listen to on a run. Now it is, though. Like what we're getting into now is the type of thing that I would want to listen to on a run. What we were talking to up to this point is not. So I want to like differentiate there, because now I think we're actually having a conversation and working through something that's more meaningful than whether to post our Wild 32 stuff in the LinkedIn or a text message.
Sure.
So it's worth differentiating, I guess, that piece.
Well, I mean, we come from a reality TV culture, right? And where people get famous just by virtue of like turning the camera on themselves and doing whatever it is they do. And while that's, you look at things like the Kardashians, and that it seems vacuous and soulless and utterly depressing. Um, they they tapped into something very primal, right? Where it's like people like watching people be people, and so that's what podcasting is to a certain degree, right? It's like we have this format where we're able to just press record and go and really show personalities, and you don't have to refine off all the sand off all the edges. You're able to be real, and there's a lot of value in that, and it leads to stuff where I agree with you that the thinking about what do you do with this data may not actually be objectively interesting like to anybody, but the figuring out how to make something, I think, is something that is interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's like the sausage making process, right? Like actually sharing that in a way that, but also there's a question of, is that on brand? Does that align with what Unration does? Right? Because if that's like what Tony does, but if that's not what Tony does in the context of Unrationed, or what Tony and Evan and Josh do together in the context of Unrationed, then actually I come around to agreeing with you that this should not be a podcast on that feed.
I could go either way, because I think what we've talked about in the last 3 minutes has been far more interesting. Not now, the difference is it's not us moving the ball forward as much as what we talked about in the first 15. I have no clue how long we've been recording at this time.
2 hours.
Time flies.
Yeah.
The stuff that I don't think is interesting was the beginning, where we were trying to figure out when we're going to start the next Wild 32. The stuff that I think is more interesting has been since we started talking about whether this should be a podcast episode or not.
Nice.
All that to say, what decisions do we need to make when we're starting Wild 32? How we're
so okay. So let's cap it at 10, and we'll see if we get 10 dudes up for doing it, and then we can figure out how we want to approach, whether we break it into 2 groups or 2 text chains or whatever.
I think having an experience, maybe we could make a decision right now on that. If we can, awesome. If it strings on into another conversation, that's fine too. I think it would be nice to have actually a data point on how it goes with 10 people, so that we could better decide whether to break it into 2 groups of 5 or not. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm trying to think of whether people will do it. It's like there are 2 ways it goes, right? There's one where people actually do it the way it's designed, and it's like, what would that look like? Will that just look like a torrent of information every day? Will we be will there be 80 messages from this one text in a way that's going to get overwhelming for people? And then there's also the thing of like, if it doesn't work and people aren't doing what you're asking them to, and then you run the risk of the thing sort of coming apart at the seams, right? Where if we're coming into it saying we're going to do this together, where these are the things we're signing up to do, and that's like 2 or 3 people aren't doing it. And after a week, that's like, and more people stop doing it. And it's just it turns into sort of a muddy soup.
Yeah,
And when I think about it actually working, I think it's probably too many texts. Like, and
makes
also
sense.
in the way that the text format is set up, and I know now you can like reply to specific messages, but it gets really unruly, right? Like the ability to do anything more than just reporting gets really challenging with 10. But then there's a question of, do we care about that? Like, because now we have this other place. We do have another place where we could have more in-depth conversations.
I
But you're
mean,
also saying you don't want to have those conversations in LinkedIn. So, although you have those on your feeds, so it's basically the same sort of thing you have there already.
um, Wild 32 is live, not processed. Anything I post, we've had this conversation. Like you had somebody on your podcast who had not processed some stuff they were going through, and so that's to me those are very different things. I do share personal things on LinkedIn, but it's processed. It's not necessarily live, particularly if it's something that needs to be processing. So some things are live, but I think we're on the same page there. They're
Yeah.
entirely different categories.
All right.
Um,
Well, you know what? We don't need to go back down that rabbit hole. I was dragging you down. Um.
so I
uh,
let me respond to what you said,
okay.
not the last part, but what you actually said. I'm with you. Like I could be convinced to do 10 and let it run its course, and if it gets soupy, that's great. That's kind of what these beginnings are for. Or to do 5 because that does sound more ideal, and it sounds like we need to add in some element of an optional element, which is something like the Zoom call that we're doing already every Tuesday, where
Like,
everybody from both cohorts, if you will, has an opportunity to show up and just chat and benefit from the momentum of other people, like 5 people doing something versus 10 people doing something, like feeling like you're a part of something bigger via a Zoom call once a week would be a great addition, it seems.
what if we go? I agreed. I think like a weekly Zoom in the context of Wild 32. That sounds great. Um, what if we went with like a pool of 10? We get like 10 if 10 men are up for it. We have captains and we pick teams. You pick teams so then you've got the 2 teams of 5, and then those 2 teams are actually in a competition to have the most greens and the fewest spankings at the end of Wild 32.
I think
Uh,
that's brilliant, and I'm in. This brings up something else though with Wild 32. I think that we should change the name of spankings to something less spanking like.
we're gonna have to table that for another time.
It's I think it's hilarious for what we've done. I don't think it comes across, or it could come across or be as on brand for people who have no clue who we are. But so what are your thoughts on changing the names of spankings to
You
red
and
X's?
you and Josh are both. You are less goofy and less weird than I am. You maybe less.
It's a I don't think it's a linear data point. I don't think there's like more or less weird that exists. I think it's all very. I think weird can't be like plotted on a graph.
I think it probably can be, but um, yeah, I mean, as I'm open to discussing that. I mean, as with most things, it's just an idea, that we throw out there and then we go with. It's like, oh, this is kind of funny. Um, things I build tend to have, part of my approach to just about everything in life is making sure I'm not taking myself too seriously, and
Sure.
using sort of silliness as a tool for disarming and like disarming the intellect a little bit, right? And helping us kind of not take ourselves too seriously in a way that we can address the task at hand. Um, that is not the way that you and Josh tend to approach things. So you like
Well,
a lot of
and
Wild
in saying
32.
that, I'll agree with you though. I don't disagree with you, even if so the whole reason I have a mustache is because my wife said not enough people get to see your not serious side. Like I have a very uh I'm fine not taking myself so seriously.
Sure.
So I'm not in a camp that disagrees with you on the way that you think about all of that. I'm on board. I think it's important, particularly for what we're doing with men, that there is an aspect of not taking ourselves so seriously built into this. And maybe spanking is the one that's like my obstacle that I've got to just get over. And maybe it's not the right word for what we're talking about.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe. All right. We could tell you. I'm not particularly attached to it.
So Monday,
Get after, bring it in. Uh 8 more gentlemen. I assume Josh will be in. And yeah, we'll get after it. See, look how much we've achieved on this podcast.
we decided on a wild 32.
We decided on Wild 32. We got some format. Um, yeah, the spankings are up for discussion. Like we maybe doing away with those. We
You've also convinced me the power of visual data to develop into a better version of myself is something I'm going to think about. And I imagine myself having a spreadsheet of Wild 32 for myself with like the past data since I've already reported on all that. So going back and getting it for the first 3 rounds
yeah
and then making one for round 4 for myself. And then having a non Wild 32 spreadsheet where I also track the data and just kind of have some data to make life decisions off of sounds like a valuable tool. That's something I'm taking away from this episode.
sure
Uh, that momentum building thing seems pretty legit. Seeing all the green.
yeah most definitely. Uh, oh
Peace out.